Justice will not be served until those who are unaffected are as outraged as those who are. Benjamin Franklin. Bending Not Breaking. Season 2, Episode 5. Avatar Day. And we're back with another episode of Bending Not Breaking. It's been a little while. We were on holiday. I'm Sunshine Mayfield.
This has been Pruitt.
And because we are doing another full-length episode, we had some mini ones out there.
They were pretty small.
There's little tiny episodes,
Yeah.
little fun ones.
Itty bitties.
Yeah, so those nice little I'm gonna go on a mile run. Perfect for those because they're only 4 minutes, and y'all are all super
Some
fast.
of them are 11 or 12 minutes.
So go on a 2-mile run.
That is not relatable for me.
How long's your mile?
What is that?
How long does it take you to run a mile?
26.2 minutes.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm a very slow
I think
runner.
I can walk a mile faster than that, though.
You can. It takes most people about 20, if that.
To walk a mile.
Yeah.
How about walking 500 miles?
I would walk 500 miles.
I wouldn't even pretend to know.
Do the math. Aren't you good at math?
No.
Okay. Well, we're back, and we're looking at the episode of Avatar Day
That's right.
through the lens of
Justice.
which is a perfect little lens because they say it in the episode.
Oh, there it is.
And you get to have a little there it is moment where you're like, oh, that's the lens we're looking at this through.
It's so nice.
And we're pretty excited. But before we jump into anything else, sometimes I think the audience wants to know a little bit more about y'all. So would you do anything fun on the holidays? Anything that was exciting for you?
I went to my aunt's house in Texas. That was nice. Cooked a lot of nice food.
Ooh, where in Texas?
Austin, Texas.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Next time we can do a live show there if you come along with me.
Please, I would love to go to Austin. I've never been. Max, have you been to Austin?
No, I have not.
Great. What did you do this holiday season?
Didn't go to Austin.
Anything else?
Do the people of our podcast know where we live?
Yes, we mentioned, it's not an every episode thing, but we mentioned that where we're recording sometimes.
Rosemary Studios.
Rosemary Studios.
Chapel Hill, North Carolina.
Yeah.
Great. I stayed in the Triangle area, except for one day. I went all the way to Charlotte, the Queen City.
Oh, what'd you do in Charlotte?
Went to a football game.
Huh.
Sports.
Was that the Belk Bowl?
Sure was.
Was that the last Belk Bowl?
Sure was.
Do you think a lot of our listeners follow sports?
Sports.
Ben doesn't.
Ben doesn't.
I'm 50-50 on it.
Max?
I follow sports, yes.
Well, cool. Well, I hope you have also been paying attention to your recaps of the last few episodes, and hopefully you're building a narrative of what could possibly be going on, because it is time for your uninformed recap. And we're going to give you the first scene, the last scene, 5 keywords, and you'll have 30 seconds to kind of talk to us about what happens this episode. Are you ready?
I sure am.
All right. First, the gang is attacked by what seems to be bounty hunters, and they narrowly escape. The final scene of this episode is the gang helps save the town from military invasion after Aang's trial. Your recap words are festival, detective, imprisoned, effigy, and facts. Do you need me to recap any of that for you?
I sure don't.
Okay. Are you ready?
No.
On your mark, get set, go.
All right. Well, this episode, of course, starts with a bunch of bounty hunters who are they narrowed the gang. They narrowly escape from the bounty hunters, which is great news for everybody. And to narrowly escape from them, they go to a festival, probably in the Caribbean of America or North America. That area between North and South America, and that's where the festival is. And upon arriving at the festival, there's a murder, and they have to put on their detective skills to solve that murder. And then they figure out who it is using DNA sampling as well as like TV, like sports style, like instant replay systems to figure out who the murderer is, and that is of course imprisoned and burned in effigy. And these are the facts of that episode. And by imprisoning that person who was
10 seconds.
detected, they saved the town from military invasions. And it turned out that Aang was the murderer, and it was after Aang's trial.
And that's a wrap.
Here's the thing. Out of context, very wrong. Like, not even close, but like,
That'd be a great episode.
technically, you're not far off.
There are some definitely things along those
You could
lines.
argue that Aang's past lives were a murderer.
You could also argue that he fell off a cliff.
That's how I see it. But I'm just saying it's possible you could say that Kyoshi was a murderer.
You could say that.
But I would say it was all in
That's
self-defense.
definitely what I would say.
Yeah.
Totally.
Max, how do you feel about Avatar Kyoshi?
Not as good as like tuna roll, or I mean even like California roll I would take. But Kyoshi's all right. It's a little too deep fried for me. But they're all good.
Well, let's get into the episode. Ben, do you want to give a 30-second real recap as fast as you can? Well, in 30 seconds, not as fast.
I think
as
you
can.
should do it.
Okay. Are you gonna time me?
Yeah. On your market set, go.
Oh, hold on. The gang gets attacked by bounty hunters, and Sokka loses his boomerang and feels like he's lost a little part of his identity. They go to the town of Jin, where they celebrate Avatar Day, but they're really scared of all the Avatar, and they're very upset with them, and so they set effigies on fire. Blue Spirit as Zuko as the Blue Spirit, stealing supplies and bringing them back to Uncle Aro. Aang is put in prison because he's the Avatar.
15 seconds.
Zuko steals from a man in a carriage who's also rich. Suki was inspired to go to go to war, and they realize Kyoshi's footprint, and they do a bunch of solving all these things, and then they realize that Aang was didn't do the murder, but he's convicted of it. But then they save the town, and everything's good.
Nice. I wasn't really counting. I was just trying to get you to go faster.
Yeah, it was fun. I feel good about it.
Cool.
I'll give it a 6.
Yeah, I mean that wasn't a 4.
All right, sure. Yeah. So our lens is justice, which it makes sense. Aang gets put on trial this episode.
Yeah, lots of things about justice are interesting.
It willingly gets put on trial.
He seems to ask for it.
It is almost as if he's like, I don't want people to have this poor vision of me. It's not like he's wanting justice to be served. He's just like, I want people to feel like they shouldn't be scared of me. I want to be able to do my job better. I am willing to go on trial because there's no way you could convict me of murder.
I think he knows his character and he wants to defend his character and defend his past lives, right?
Which, again, there's a moment at the end that we'll get to, which I think is like so outside of his character, it's really confusing for me in this
Can't wait to hear about it.
So let's talk justice. What are moments when you're looking through the lens of justice? What moments popped out for you?
Well, I think I want to pause and let's break down justice for a second.
I think that would be helpful.
So justice for me is pretty problematic because of the interpretation aspect. So justice, like similar to beauty almost, is in the eye of the beholder. It sometimes plays into the oppressor's hands if the system itself is unjust. So I think it's interesting because justice is this really malleable thing, it seems, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around it even after watching this episode and processing.
There's moments. So one of the definitions, I think that when I'm thinking justice, probably the definition that most likely my lens was through was the quality of being fair and reasonable. Like that's what I think of justice. I want this thing happened. We need to right this wrong. And
for me, the definition was moral rightness or righteousness.
Right. But if you look at it as a just behavior or something to justify your behavior or treatment of something else, does justice allow you to be unkind? Does that allow you to do things you normally wouldn't typically do because it's just, or because you feel like it's just,
because someone is telling you that it's just? Right.
You are just in killing that individual for breaking into your home. Because they broke into your home.
Well, that's a law, and the law is the law.
And so, even though you might be against murder, is that murder? Is it self-defense? Is it justice if you do that, right? And so, part of it is, and then in this episode, I think we get to a point where it's like, is it justice or is it revenge?
Well, and that's just, for me, again, it's like, it's all about this interpretation, right? Where this could be just for somebody because of the knowledge and information that I have, but it becomes unjust once you have a bigger picture. It becomes unjust once you have more information, or when you, like, it just seems, justice seems like a trap for me, because I could think something is right and moral, and then 5 minutes later, I could learn something that makes me think that it's not.
But you've already made your decision.
But
to
I've already made the
dictate your
decision.
behavior.
Yeah.
Can you think of a time in your life where that has happened in work or in personal relationships?
Well, it's funny. There's a pretty strong hashtag right now of hindsight 2020.
Right.
Right. And for me, it feels like hindsight 2020. Sometimes you make decisions, and after making it, you look back and you're like, oh, definitely should have gone another way.
Should have approached it differently.
Should have approached it differently. Should have
differently.
said this. Shouldn't have said that. And justice feels similarly. There are so many trials where, 50 years later, they found evidence and, this person's innocent. And they lost 50 years of their life. But they were doing the right thing based off the information they had at the time.
Maybe.
Not always, right?
Maybe they were doing the right thing.
Yeah, and like there are so many trials, especially when it comes to racial trials, frankly. So when African American people,
Central Park 5.
there are so many examples where innocent people were put away because of the color of their skin.
I mean, it still happens.
And it's still happening. And so for me, like, this whole using the system and blaming the system, and it just makes me really nervous to think about justice at all in this way. And this whole episode just really churned that around for me.
Yeah, because I think for me, with everything we've talked about, it's, all right, am I still living into my values, even though I might be justified in behaving a certain way? I might be justified in getting angry and yelling at someone because of what they said to me or the way that they treated me or something that they did. People might understand.
Yeah.
And it still might be outside of my values. And is that the way that I need to behave in that moment?
Yep.
And there's not a perfect answer for that in every situation.
There's not.
I have theories, right? Like, I feel like you should live within your values, but, like, there still might be moments where it is okay to live outside your values. Maybe. I don't know. So again,
to bring it back to the episode, for me, in the very beginning, I wonder if these bounty hunters feel just by wrangling up this team, or trying to wrangle him up.
he's the Avatar.
He's the Avatar. Do they feel like it is a just cause to capture the Avatar, or is it, I'm trying to earn a quick dime? And does that make it just in their mind?
I don't. So this is a perfect thing where we could sit there and say, like, morally, doing it for money, not just, right?
Sure.
But if you are picturing it, if you've been pitched and learned your entire life, the Avatar is going to bring the destruction of my family and my nation.
Exactly.
And that's what you've been taught growing up. Is it just for someone to say, I need you to go capture the Avatar, and you go, yes, I'm going to do that because it's going to save my family?
And that brings me to a common theme for us is, what's the most generous assumption? The generous assumption in this case is to assume that they feel this is a just cause, right? They feel that it is just and right morally to capture the Avatar. They're just benefiting from the profits, right? But they are capturing the Avatar because they believe it's the right thing.
And I don't think we ever find out if they're doing it for money. I say they are like bounty hunters.
Yeah.
That's what I envision them to be.
I wrote bounty hunters,
They don't look like they're military.
Yeah.
But later on, they invade the town of Jin, and they say, this is a military invasion. We're taking this over for the Fire Nation.
You're right. Maybe they aren't bounty hunters.
So I don't know. I don't
know why I wrote that. I wrote that down too.
I felt like they were. They weren't in military garb. They were all dressed in their own kind of like warrior get up. And so I put bounty hunter because also I just watched Mandalorian, and bounty hunter's on the brain, you know?
Sure. So Sokka had to leave his boomerang behind.
Yeah, while Aang and Katara both went back for their prized possessions.
Yeah.
Well, and so here's where, like, Sokka forgot faster, like, didn't remember as quickly. If he would have remembered at the same speed that they did, maybe he would have been able to go get it. But at the point he remembers, it's like, they're up in the air, they're already gone.
Yeah, but we have time to go back for Aang's this and Katara's that.
To be fair, at that moment, I don't think they did. I think that they had time when Aang was like, I need to go get my staff, and Katara goes, I need to go get my scroll. They were on the ground. They haven't yet taken off. Sokka just remembers 30 seconds too late after they're already getting fired at in the air.
Well, it's interesting then because Sokka is probably in the mindset of, oh, you guys got to do this, but I didn't. And it's not even probably. Like, that is his mindset right now.
Right, absolutely.
Right? And so, because of that and the story he's telling himself, I wonder if that affects his, y'all had time to do this, but I didn't.
Well, and I felt like once Katara gave the very matter-of-fact answer of, yeah, then I feel like he takes it pretty well. Like, I feel like he's like, oh, yeah, you're right. Like, that's what it felt like to me. I didn't feel resentment between him and Katara or him and Aang because of it. So, maybe.
I thought it was interesting.
So, let's talk. We get to this place. They realize it's Avatar Day. They're excited. And then they realize that this town is burning these effigies of past avatars and current avatar.
Yeah, it's Avatar Day.
And Katara feels just in putting out the fires of the effigies and kind of announcing their arrival as to who they are.
Sure.
I don't know if I would have done that. Like, I think, like, now that if I was in their place, right, easy to say from the outskirts and not actually in their position, they've gone through town after town, and sometimes it's gone good, but most of the time it hasn't. Like, I don't think I'd be announcing my arrival, and I don't think I would have, like, if I would have seen them, especially if I saw them burning an effigy of me, I would have been like, nah, I'm gonna stay I'm gonna stay low key right now.
So I think there's a difference between what is right and what is intelligent.
Right.
Maybe. And
well, like, why is it right? Like, why does it matter that they're burning effigies of you? And, like, does that matter?
I think that there's a lot of people when it comes to burning American flags that would argue a similar deal. Like, why does it matter? But then there's a lot of people who would argue it matters a great deal.
Oh, sure.
Symbols matter.
And yes, symbols do matter. Yes.
Right?
Yeah, and I think in that moment, maybe if I wasn't the Avatar, I would feel, hey, we shouldn't be doing this. Maybe not if I was from that town.
Sure.
But if I was the Avatar, I think that would be a moment where I'd be like, this is an angry mob, and I don't really want to deal with them right now.
Or other people might simply feel unsafe
Right.
and then run. But Aang, again, we talked about this in season 1, but Aang has the privilege of being powerful.
Feeling like he can handle it.
He can
But
handle
Katara
it.
does. Katara makes the initial move, right? So she's the one that puts out the effigy.
But Katara is a pretty powerful waterbender at this point.
That's true. Yeah. Master.
Right? And right now, we don't know that any of these people are benders or not in this town.
It doesn't seem
seem like it, right? And so I wonder if that privilege comes into play, right?
Probably a little bit. But so why does she feel just into putting that? Like, that's just a moral, like, we shouldn't be burning this. I'm going to stand up for my friend. I feel justified in making this action and putting out the effigies.
Well, I wonder if I think it's interesting because, as we know, Katara gives us the intro every episode, and she is talking about how much she believes in Aang. And we hear it every episode, how much she believes in Aang. I believe he has the power to save the world. And what they see and what she sees by them burning this down is a complete, just frankly, bastardization of the entire Avatar concept.
And her belief system.
So
it might be less of defending Aang himself.
Maybe it's more about her
beliefs and defending her beliefs.
Maybe.
Interesting.
I don't know. Not in her head.
Yeah, that's true.
But that's an interesting reading to think about, right?
Maybe she's doing it not to protect Aang, but to defend her own beliefs and her own and what's important to her.
And maybe it's both, you know? It doesn't have to be one or the other. It can be both.
It can be both. Let's go. So Aang gives himself up. He's going on trial. He finds out after they've collected evidence and they find out that Kyoshi couldn't have made that footprint and that the temple wasn't made until after she was there. And they found out all this evidence. And he gets told straight up, evidence doesn't matter. it's your side of the story and it's my side of the story.
That's right.
And that's why they call it justice, because it's just us.
I think the quote is, evidence? That's not how our system works. It's just like, how terrible is that? It's terrifying because, again, it points to if the system
is
corrupt, then justice doesn't seem even possible, right? For the individual.
Well, and we see moments of what I would consider a corrupt system that maybe is a necessary evil, but I don't know. I'm not in the position of making the system, but you see Aang barter for lesser time, or a lesser sentence, so that he can then be a benefit to the town.
Yeah.
And so it's an interesting, like, it made me think of, like, people cutting deals and getting less prison sentencing by ratting on somebody else or by...
Yep.
And then versus, like, no, you did this crime. I don't care what else you do. Like, this is the sentence for that crime. But you see him start to barter and say, like, hey, I don't want to help out unless maybe you not burn me in oil.
Yep.
And so, again, is the system corrupt? Is that a just system? And if it is, then, yeah, you start to lose hope in that.
Yeah.
And we even get a moment of that with Iroh and Zuko in the cave before Zuko leaves, where Iroh essentially says, you can't lose hope. Like, you have to have hope.
That's right.
That's a damn Yankees quote.
The musical?
Yeah. You have to have hope. Mustn't sit around and mope.
Interesting. I haven't seen that musical in a long time. Good pull, Mexicongo.
It's a good point, too, I think.
Nice.
Don't sit around and mope. You gotta have hope.
You gotta have hope.
I don't know. Feel your feelings, man. That's kind of where I sit. I think you can feel your feelings and still have hope.
Yeah.
But so you get this moment with Zuko where he gets told, this is the line where you got to find the hope inside of you. And Zuko decides to up and leave after stealing all of these things from people. And what my guess is he feels is a real Robin Hood style moment. Like, it's a real, like, we've heard him talk about, like, I'm a prince. I deserve more than the way that I'm being treated. And so is he stealing out of feeling like he's justified and he is owed this?
That's something that I wrote too. Like, as the blue spirit, he's recovering food by stealing, right? He's taking food. Does he know this is not okay? Or is he totally like, I need to do this.
Well, he steals food.
It's my right.
Right, so you get your Aladdin moment, right? Like, I'm taking bread because I need bread.
Yep.
And it's either that or die, and so I'm going to choose that.
But it also seems like he's taking...
he steals coins from the guy and then buys this really immaculate teapot for his uncle.
Yep.
And I love Uncle Iroh just being like, I really just love a, tin cup and a ceramic mug, or a ceramic teapot. I think that makes the best tea. And Zuko kind of gets deflated a little bit because he's expecting his uncle to be more
tea tastes
excited.
Good out of whatever you're drinking it from.
So, yeah, it's tough because I think you, at a certain point, you have the most generous assumption I can make is not that he thinks like this is what he needs, because he starts stealing more than what I would consider necessities.
Yeah.
Now, granted, there might be other people that say, no, that's a necessity. Like, you have to have those things. But I don't know if I feel that way about a really fancy teapot and a bunch of coins and things that might not have been needed.
Yeah.
So
I just think it's interesting because Zuko just steals so much over the course of this episode, and it ends with him leaving. And so part of me wonders...
On a stolen animal.
Yeah, correct.
That he already stole from someone else.
And so I think that I wonder if all of that stealing is building up in him and he's realizing that he is not in a good place. And so he's choosing to do something about it and leave. I wonder if he feels like there's pressure traveling with Uncle Iroh of feeling like he needs to impress him. And so he feels like
he's failing him. Feels like he's failing his
uncle and needs to leave and do things on his own so as not to feel that pressure.
And Iroh lets him go. With not any real combativeness, with more of a like, it seems like this is something you need to do, so I'm going to allow you to do it.
Yeah.
And gives him the stolen chocobo.
Yep. It's interesting. I think there are other points that I want to skip to, if that's okay.
I would love for us to do that.
Can we talk about how this town has immortalized a past hero through a statue, and I should say perceived hero, right?
Yes.
And how, because of their lack of the complete story, they have attributed so much to this guy who ended up kind of being not great. And I'm just curious what our thoughts are on that and how that plays into our world today.
So I think there's a lot of context that you have to think about, especially when was the statue put up? Why was the statue put up?
Yep.
Did it happen the day of his funeral as a way to celebrate him? Was it put up 100 years later to justify their Avatar Day of burning effigies, and or was it because, someone wanted to pick a fight, wasn't stoked with what Kiyoshi did, and so put the statue up as the purpose of, I'm going to start creating a narrative around this. I think we see it a lot today, specifically in the South, but throughout the United States at least. Statues that were put up 50 years after the Civil War, but with intent to celebrate the Confederate soldiers that fought for the South. So you see that all across the South, and I think, you get a lot of people who are excited about those things, who feel like it's a part of heritage and a part of history, and you feel like people who say those were put up not to celebrate heritage and history, but to put up because they were made
To celebrate what they were fighting for.
Celebrate what they were fighting for, and as a scare tactic. There's a lot of data that would point that those statues were put up during the Jim Crow era as a tactic to scare people.
Yeah.
People of color. So, so I think that you do have to, it goes back to symbols, right? And how important symbols can be, similar with language, how important language can be.
That's right.
And so are you just in fighting for this statue, for this idea, if you don't know the context around it, or don't truly know the story around it, just the story you've been told?
And how do you know you don't know?
How do you know you don't know is the $1 million question for majority of the issues that we talk about.
Yep.
And I think that that's just by consistently asking people to tell you more, to continue to learn, to continue to seek to learn, to continue to challenge yourself. But I would say that's how you do it.
One of the things I want to learn more about from this episode is the prisoners that Aang ends up being with and spending time with.
Some of my favorite characters
They
in this
seem
episode.
super cool.
Aang, of course she'll fall for you. You're wonderful.
Yeah, well, it's interesting.
And you're the Avatar.
Well, I think it's interesting because he goes into it, and the first thing we see is like, oh no, this guy's super intimidating.
You're bald and you've got tattoos. You're gonna fit right in.
And the way he talks to Aang is intimidating, the tone of voice and things like that. And all of a sudden we're like, oh no. And then we come back and they're sharing their life story.
You also do that after you've realized that the trial that Aang is about to have is one that most of the viewers would not consider to be just.
Yep.
So it then begs the question, how many people are imprisoned?
Unjustly incarcerated.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
And it would seem that the answer is probably yes.
It's likely.
Especially after you go through the trial, you can still assume, like, maybe a majority of these people were not here for something that's deservingly should have put them there.
So I wonder if part of Aang's, role in this world, which is to achieve balance, right? That's like his main goal between the spirit world and the physical world, but also balance between the four nations. It's just balance in general. Mm-hmm. I wonder if or maybe this happened and we just didn't get to see it in the episode. Maybe this will be my headcanon, that all of these prisoners that were unjustly incarcerated are also given a chance to redeem themselves, right? And if not, should that have been part of Aang's responsibility to address? I wonder.
To stick around and to help show that these people should not be here.
Yeah, I wonder.
I mean, potentially. And then it goes, is there someone else better to do that job? Is there, you can't do everything, so should you focus on one thing?
Yeah.
Which brings up a really interesting point. I was watching The Patriot Act on Netflix, and one of the things at the end of the year that he kind of said at the end of his show, and he always talks about a different issue every single week, similar to a John Oliver or anything else like that.
Hassan Minaj.
Yes. Thank you, Max. And he specifically spoke about this emotional overload that people feel when there's just so many issues. And his kind of challenge to his viewership was pick one thing to really go after in 2020. And so I wonder if that's kind of where Aang is at, where he's got to go after his one thing that he's got to focus on and start allowing other people to be inspired to do some of the other work that's out there. Which is an interesting thought if that's why he couldn't stick around and help release those prisoners, is that he has to focus so heavily on his thing.
Well, and we found out that presenting facts is not his strong point. Like, he had all the facts on his side when he was presenting.
Not
to
a great
town.
lawyer. Wouldn't make a good lawyer.
Well, that tells me right there why people have the right to a lawyer.
Right.
Why that is a right. Why that is something that you are given, right? And I think that tells us why. It's because some people cannot
Even with
represent
all the
themselves.
facts presented in front of him.
Even with a perfect lineup of facts that clearly makes it so that he's not
guilty.
I just think that's fascinating. And so it tells me that the Avatar can't solve every problem.
Correct.
Right? And so he is, as you said, he has a pretty dark moment at the end where...
Yeah, where there's that moment where the judge, I can't remember his name.
Mayor Tong.
Mayor
Tong.
Mayor Tong says, Avatar, help us, save us. And he goes, I don't know. I was supposed to be boiled.
That was a pretty good, close to his voice.
I could do voice acting, maybe. Maybe I'll try it out.
Funnily enough, that's the same actor as, what's his name? Chifu in Mulan and a bunch of other things. Just FYI.
That feels right.
Yeah.
Well, you get a lot of fun little cameos in the show.
Yeah.
George Takei has been on it before.
Yep. He was the warden.
Mm-hmm. So you get this moment, save us, help us, and Aang goes, oh, I'm supposed to be boiled. And just kind of stares him down. As the military is coming in, they are
destroying stuff.
They are destroying stuff. They are potentially hurting people. And Aang is still taking the time to sit there and be like, no, I can't do anything. I'm going to be... And so finally he moves it to community service and then goes, serve our community.
Yeah. Well, I think it's interesting because when we're in despair, we give into our darkest urges. Right? When we are in shame, we are more likely to act in a way that
outside of our
prolongs
values.
Our shame.
Yeah.
It makes us even more ashamed, and it's this downward spiral. And we see this spiral right now. We see that when Aang is put into a place where he is put down and when he is cast aside and not cared for, that he starts to act outside of his values. And I think that's really telling for us. So, I wonder then, does despair allow us to bypass justice and call it justice still? Right? So when we are, what is the story we're telling ourselves when we get down into the despair? And I wonder if that's where Zuko was as well. I see this parallel between Zuko and Aang in this moment, right? Where they were both down. They realize that they are doing things that are not okay. And then they act that way. And then Aang moves forward and helps community service. Zuko ends up leaving. I just think that there's an interesting parallel there.
Yeah, and how we handle our shame and how we handle the feelings that we have about ourselves.
Yep.
And the paths that takes us down. Final question. Did Kyoshi kill Jin? Was it murder?
I vote no.
I would vote no as well. Self-defense. And he fell after she separated the islands.
I agree.
Now, she caused it, but he got angry and jumped up and down and the rocks fell.
Yeah, maybe I should do a little bit better about having some empathy and sympathy in that moment, but I am not mad about it.
He was a conqueror. Did he deserve to die? That's a whole different episode that we don't have time to dive into.
Yep.
But yeah, we are going to take a quick break. Then we're going to come back with a fun little voicemail, and then we'll go into our devotion for the episode. How's that sound to you?
Sounds great.
Max, you got anything you want to add before we do that?
Nope, that works for me.
All right, we will be back in just a moment.
You have reached the voicemail box of
Bending Not Breaking.
Please leave a message after the tone.
Hey guys, loving the show and enjoying you guys' commentary, especially your specific look at certain things for each episode, like your Avatar stage 1 for self-care. That was a really great episode and a really important message as well that you guys talked about. So my name's Fran. I should probably have started with that. And I am an Avatar The Last Airbender YouTuber at A Healthy Dose of Fran. And the podcast for Avatar, absolutely fantastic. And I'm glad that I finally found you guys, and I feel so bad that it took me forever to find you guys' podcast. But you guys have really great insights as a whole to Avatar The Last Airbender. And I hope when you guys eventually go on to do Legend of Korra, if you do Legend of Korra, that I'll be able to hear your great insights for that show as well. Hopefully you'll be able to get this one in time for the episode Avatar Day. But the thing that I find most interesting about Avatar Day in terms of like a phrase that would work for the show is this idea and sense of justice, and that particularly fits with Kyoshi, Avatar Kyoshi as a character. Everything about her, and this also ties in with the book Rise of Kyoshi, and if you guys haven't read that, I definitely recommend you checking that out. Her character and her way of acting and thinking is all about this sense of justice, not in terms of like an entitlement to justice or seeking justice and retribution, but a different side to it. And I think it's just a really interesting part of her character and how that episode as a whole views this idea of a sense of justice. So Aang, it is this sense of justice to prove that he is not a killer, which obviously, of course, Avatar Kyoshi very clearly stomps that out. Yes, no, she did kill a man. But it's also the other characters' ideas and their own interpretations of what justice is. For the town, it's getting their own retribution for losing their leader. For Aang, it's proving that they're wrong. For Sokka, it's to have a great hat, but also to prove that he is intelligent and he understands the correct way in which justice should be sought. And he does go about it the right way. Both he and Katara prove that seeking the correct answers to find true justice is important. And that's kind of just the insight I have as a whole about the Avatar Day episode and its ideas on justice. I don't know if that's what you guys would have chosen in the end for that episode, but that's my 2 cents. Love the guys, love the show, can't wait for more, and have a great day, guys.
Fran, thank you so much for sending that in. Thank you so much for taking the time to do that. Ben and I always say it truly does mean the world to us that we have people that are willing to send those things in and be a part of this with us. We don't know everything. We are not experts, and so it is wonderful to have y'all's input. And Fran, is it Kismet? Is Kismet the word I'm looking for when picking the same? Like, we picked the same lens by happenstance, and I think that's pretty cool. One of the moments for me and everything that you said that I just didn't even think about was Sokka and Katara search for justice the entire episode, which is so clearly happening, but it didn't even dawn on me that that's what was going on. They are searching for justice the entire show, and then how they handle the fact that everything that they are searching for was rendered useless by someone in power. And I think they did a better job, and Ben, you might agree, I think they did a better job of handling it than I would have. I would have been hopeless, I think, in that moment. And it seems like they're still pretty like, no, we've got a shot. It might not be a good shot, but like, we can do this. Aang's got this. And I think for me, I would have been more devastated had I gone through all this work to find clear evidence that defends my friend, and then to be told like, no, you can't use that. That's not gonna save. That's not gonna help him. And so that was just something I didn't even think about, was their search for justice along the entirety of the episode. So thank you so much for bringing that to light and for your input on that. I think you were spot on, at least in my opinion. Not that that matters, but I think you hit the nail on the head on everything else, and I wholeheartedly agree. Ben, any thoughts?
I'm grateful for the voicemail, and you said it very nicely.
Oh, well, let's talk a little bit about. Well, thank you again, Fran. If you want to join and send a voicemail in thearchivy@gmail.com. Just do a voice memo and email that to us, and we would love to have you be a part of the show. We need to go into our devotion.
It's time for the devotion.
And we are talking about justice through a
lens
of earth.
Earth.
The element of earth.
We're back to earth already. Can you believe it?
Yeah, and so, Ben, what are you going to do?
So, earth for me, again, reminds me of stability. And I think of the types of earths that aren't stable. So, sand. The sides of a mountain where there's been erosion and there's mudslides and things like that. And that's kind of what comes to mind when I think of justice, unfortunately. I think of it's loose and it's treacherous if you're trying to make stable foundation on it. And so I think for me, it's how do we get to a point where we are moving towards stability and foundation? So how do I find stable ground so that I can feel safer knowing that justice is happening in a system that I can buy into rather than justice happening on sand where it falls away? That's kind of what's going through my head right now.
Yeah. I think for me, with the earth in mind, I have friends that keep me grounded. I have my square inch of paper that I could write their names on and people that I trust. And
I don't know if you heard of Brene Brown, but she came up with a very similar thing.
Oh, Brene Brown. Interesting.
Yeah.
What is Bernie?
Bernie Brown.
Brene?
That's what all the stickers mean.
Brene.
Oh, Brene. So for me, I've got friends that I think keep me grounded and keep me humble. And I want to make sure that when I'm acting and feeling justified in my actions, I want their opinion on whether or not that's outside of my values or when they act outside of my values. And so I think this week I'm going to ask 3 or 4 of my close friends and say, are there moments that you see me outside of my value system and behavior that I tend to think is justified, but have you ever seen me outside of my value system? And then listen and see what they have to say about that. With the exception of when I'm playing video games, I know very well I'm outside of my value system when screaming at the television.
Yeah, PSA, never play Mario Kart with Sunshine.
Oh, I become very rude, unfortunately. I'm working on it. So yeah, I think that's what I'm going to do is just talk to the people that keep me grounded and ask them, when am I living outside of my value system, even in moments that I feel justified in. Well, thank you so much for a wonderful episode.
Thank you.
This has been lovely. Max, and as always, thank you.
Yeah.
And listeners, thank you.
Thank you. For real, though.
This has been fun. We are wrapping up this episode. Remember to follow us at BNB_pod on Twitter and Instagram. Send us any emails or feedback to thearchivy@gmail.com. And we will be back next time. I'm Sunshine Mayfield.
This has been Pruitt.
And this has been Bending Not Breaking. Thank you for listening.
Bye-bye.